Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk New Mexico, coming to you live from Studio A at KUNM. I'm your host, Ty Bannerman. From the possible transfer of Sandia Wilderness land to the oversight of the Sandia Pueblo, to a spate of ICE arrests in Santa Fe and controversy over a mosque opening in Albuquerque's North Valley, we've seen some big stories this summer. And on today's Let's Talk New Mexico, we'll be taking a closer look at them with the journalists who reported them. And we will also look into some stories that may have slipped beneath your radar. As always, we'll be taking your comments and questions. What would you like to know more about when it comes to some of the bigger headlines? Or is there a story that you think needs more attention? You can email us at letstalk@kunm.org or call in right now, 505-277-5866. So let's start with the biggest story, at least in terms of acreage. Back in June, Sandia Pueblo Governor Stuart Paisano told the Sandoval County Commissioners that the tribe was requesting congressional approval to transfer 10,000 acres of Sandia Mountain's west face from the oversight of the Forest Service to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, where it would be held in trust for the tribe. My first guest is Lily Alexander, who reported on this story in the Santa Fe New Mexican and Searchlight New Mexico. Thank you for coming in this morning, Lily.
Thank you for having me.
So for our listeners who haven't read your story, what exactly is Sandia Pueblo proposing to do with these 10,000 acres, and where exactly is this land located on the Sandia Mountain?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, as you said, it's 10,000 acres on the west face of the Sandia Mountains. This area includes some pretty popular trails like La Luz. Mm-hmm. About 2 million people per year visit the area. But also, as you said, the Sandia Pueblo is proposing that the land be transferred from the U.S. Forest Service to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, where it would be held in a trust for the Sandia Pueblo. The reason being, Paisano, when talking to the Sandoval County Commission in June, cited federal budget cuts, staffing shortages that have made poor trail conditions and road conditions up there. Also, he cited an increase in vandalism and litter in the area. So the idea is basically that the U.S. Forest Service is not adequately managing the land up there right now.
Mm-hmm. So would Sandia Pueblo then be put in charge of managing the land, or would that be the Bureau of Indian Affairs?
It would be the Pueblo,
okay.
Yeah.
So there is an important kind of history behind this particular land, which several of our listeners commented on via the SpeakPipe app on our website. Here's a message we got from Courtney.
Hi, let's talk at KUNM. This is Courtney Bryan. I'm one of the spokespersons for Sandias for All. What most people don't realize is that the Sandias actually are in a co-trust today. This was put into effect by the Pueblo in 2003 and signed off by existing Pueblo Governor Stuart Paisano himself. In fact, it was put into Congress in perpetuity to protect the Sandias for public access as well as the Pueblo. So it's supposed to exist for all time. And 23 short years later, the same governor, Paisano, is stating that there's litter and vandalism and sacred sites being defaced, and we aim to take these claims incredibly seriously. We want to address them, which is why we have proposed, in conjunction with Senator Heinrich's office, a task force to address these claims. We want to make sure the land is managed and cared for and loved. But be clear, these are all management issues. They are not ownership issues, and no one party should own the land. It should be shared and enjoyed by all persons, Native American and otherwise. Thank you very much.
And we even got a message from one of our younger listeners who weighed in.
My name is Levy Williams. I am 8 years old. I love climbing in the Sandia Mountains. I want them to remain open for everybody.
Okay, so going back to Courtney's comments, can we talk about this 2003 federal legislation that she mentioned? Can you explain what that agreement established between Sandia Pueblo and the federal government?
Mm-hmm. Right. So the 2003 Federal Act settled a years-long lawsuit that settled the Sandia Pueblo's claims to that area and confirmed the status of both national forest and wilderness lands there. So it basically said that the Forest Service should continue to manage and administer the area on behalf of the U.S. as national forest system lands. But then it also said that traditional and cultural uses by members of the Sandia Pueblo and other tribes should not be restricted, except for due to other regulations in place at the time.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to point out that we did reach out to Sandia Pueblo, but we did not receive a return call soon enough for them to be on this program. Now, Sandia Pueblo says the transfer would not eliminate public access, and Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has endorsed the proposal on those grounds. What would actually be guaranteed to the public if the transfer happens, and what kind of access would not necessarily be guaranteed?
It's kind of hard to say. As you just said, Governor Paisano has said repeatedly that access to trails that the public go to would not be diminished at all under the transfer. Although some, of course, have expressed concern that under perhaps a different governor in the future, access could be limited if that governor doesn't feel the same way as Paisano.
I see. In your story, you interviewed outdoor enthusiasts such as the ones that we've heard from today. They are particularly concerned about the area's wilderness designation. What could change about that land's legal protections if it moves out of the Forest Service system?
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. People have expressed concerns that if the area loses its wilderness protections, it could open up room for drilling, perhaps, because that protection is afforded by it being designated wilderness.
Mm-hmm. Are there resources that we would want somebody might want to drill for there?
Yes. Some have said, I can't remember what exactly they are, but yeah, people have expressed concerns that there would be sort of a target there.
So there is some sort of interest in that. One thing that struck me in the story is that some of the people who oppose the transfer, like Courtney, who we heard from, are not necessarily opposed to Sandia Pueblo having greater control over the land. What are they asking for instead? What is the potential middle ground here? Mm-hmm.
Well, Courtney just mentioned a task force. I've heard that as well. And Senator Heinrich actually recently said that he would support maybe legislation that would encourage some sort of co-management between the Forest Service and the Pueblo to ensure that the land is adequately managed. Any concerns about vandalism or litter are addressed, but that access to trails and nearby homes and such are not limited.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, Senator Heinrich has kind of weighed in on this a little bit. This would require an act of Congress for it to happen. How are the New Mexico representatives lining up on this issue? What are they saying about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Heinrich initially said that he would not support any sort of proposal that would limit access for the public to that area. As I said, he said he might support some co-management legislation. Representative Melanie Stansbury, her public sort of stance has been a little less direct. She previously said that the Forest Service has failed to uphold its responsibilities to adequately manage the land. But she hasn't directly stated whether she would support legislation to move this land into the trust and transfer its management.
Is there any way that people who are concerned about the Sandia Mountains could try to push the Forest Service to take on more of the responsibility that they should, or is this entirely out of local hands?
I think probably the outdoors people, especially those who have created this Sandias for All coalition, would say yes. A lot of folks that I interviewed in this story also said that they didn't necessarily see this increased vandalism and litter that folks have been talking about. A lot of people said that, as outdoors people, when they're on a trail and they see litter, they'll pick it up. Yeah.
One thing that I have noticed about at least the public level of debate over this is that although people seem fairly passionate, it also seems like there's a lot of kind of understanding of the issues at the heart of it, and it's really just a matter of trying to find a way that pleases all parties. Is that what you're seeing when you're talking to folks?
I think so, yeah. A lot of arguments on like every side are rooted in this 2003 history and even go back before that to the lawsuit. It seems like everyone is very informed about this land. The Sandias for All folks have put together a bunch of different resources like maps and stuff that they've pointed to give everyone an adequate understanding of what's happening.
So what should folks who care about the Sandias and are kind of watching this issue develop, what should they be looking for? What might happen next? Mm-hmm.
Well, as we said, this would require an act of Congress. So folks would look out for federal legislation that would move this 10,000 acres from the Forest Service to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The state, on the state level, the Sandoval County Commission initially in June said that they support it. I know that advocates for the land and outdoors people have attended other county commission meetings like the Bernalillo County Commission earlier this week to encourage them to take a stance on it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you, Lily. And for our listeners, our lines are open, and you can weigh in on this issue, and you can ask questions. If you spent any time hiking, biking, climbing, or otherwise enjoying the Sandias, we'd love to know what you would want to see happen with these 10,000 acres. Our line is 505-277-5866. So the next story is one that a lot of folks in Santa Fe are especially upset about. And that is the arrest of two people by ICE, the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, both of whom had children with them, and one of whom was on his way to a doctor's appointment. So we're going to turn to Patrick Lohman with Source New Mexico for the inside track on this story. Good morning, Patrick.
Good morning.
So, Patrick, what exactly happened in Santa Fe on Wednesday, August 9th? What do we know about the circumstances surrounding these arrests?
We know that Edgar Chacon Miranda was bringing one of his three children, an 11-year-old, to the Alto Clinic in Santa Fe. ICE told us later that they had been following him. They tracked him into the parking lot, and then when they stepped out of the vehicle to go to their doctor's appointment, ICE surrounded him and arrested him. And then shortly after that, the clinic put out a statement trying to reassure the public and kind of raising the alarm about this. That set in motion a days-long kind of back and forth about the way that ICE had been operating, can operate in New Mexico, about what sensitive places are, about how the city and state can be trying to protect residents against the ICE arrests. That event sort of set off a week's worth of debate about ICE in New Mexico. Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that people are so concerned about this is that he did have his 11-year-old daughter with him. What happened to her? Was she just left there, or? I'm
not entirely sure, honestly. I believe that in the aftermath, their family came to pick her up. But that was certainly something that angered everybody who'd been following this. There had not been much consideration for what would happen to the child after they had picked up her father.
This is Let's Talk New Mexico. I'm Ty Bannerman. What do you think of what do you think that the government of Santa Fe or the state of New Mexico should be doing in the wake of these increased ICE arrests? You can give us a call and share your opinion at 505-277-5866. Stay with us. You are listening to Let's Talk New Mexico. We're talking about some of the biggest news stories of the summer. You can share your thoughts by calling 505-277-5866 or email us at letstalk@kunm.org. I'm speaking to Patrick Lohman with Source New Mexico, talking about an increase in ICE arrests in Santa Fe as well as perhaps other parts of the state. Now, we were just talking about the arrest of Edgar Chacon Miranda, who was taken by ICE while taking his daughter to an appointment at La Familia Clinic in Santa Fe. Now, you spoke with two young relatives of the people who were arrested. What did they tell you about what they witnessed that day? What did the arrest look like from their perspective?
So we've already talked about Chacon Miranda. The 11-year-old did not speak at this news conference that Congresswoman Teresa Ledger Fernandez later convened, but an eyewitness of another arrest spoke, and she was another young woman who was there with her daughter and her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law is Amanda Ruiz. It was a very young baby, 2 months old or so, if I recall correctly, on oxygen. And they were getting in their car to go to an appointment. They were not like on the property of a medical clinic, unlike the other example. But the moment they got into their car, ICE surrounded them and demanded that her mother-in-law step out of the vehicle. Ultimately, according to her daughter-in-law, Ruiz decided that for the sake of the infant and other people in the car, she should get out of the vehicle, surrendered herself to arrest. At the time that I talked to her, her relatives did not know where she was. Typically in these cases, if it's anything like other ICE arrests in New Mexico, she would have gone to a holding facility, perhaps in Albuquerque, and then to most likely the Torrance County Detention Facility in Estancia. But they didn't know any of that. They were still waiting to hear from her. She had health concerns herself that they were worried about. Basically she was just kind of at this news conference, and later in speaking with me, the daughter-in-law was very upset and concerned and felt like it was a very intimidating show of force unnecessarily for a woman who had health problems and did not, as far as she knew have any like previous record or anything that would have prompted that amount of aggression.
Yeah, so what do we know about the people who were arrested? Were they being specifically sought by ICE for any known reason? And has ICE said anything about why they were taken in this fairly dramatic fashion?
So we do not know yet a few things. One, I have asked ICE, and they have said that they are working on a response, whether there has in fact been an increase in activity across the state. Certainly organizations are reporting that, they are kind of the front line for hearing from families of people who have been arrested. So, so they would perhaps know, but we don't have any real numbers, and they're all kind of different organizations. So we don't know whether ICE has in fact really stepped up in the way that operations. We don't know much about the nature of that, whether there's a pattern or a goal, or whether it's in response to anything. In the case of Edgar Chacon Miranda, ICE did tell me that it was a targeted enforcement operation given Miranda's previous criminal history, which includes a series of very serious charges from 2018 that were later dropped. And they pointed to that arrest as proof that they are going after the, quote, worst of the worst. That's why they targeted him. I don't know about the other arrests. We believe that there were as many as 16 arrests within a short period in Santa Fe. And then yesterday in Albuquerque at a news conference, different groups kind of gave different numbers, but they know of at least like between them a dozen that have happened in recent days, which they said was like a very big increase, even if you consider the full 18 months of President Trump's second term.
Yeah, so that kind of points out a problem with how do we go about verifying what's actually happened, given the nature of ICE's activities being fairly secretive. They don't announce to the public, their operations necessarily. Do we have like video of these arrests? How do we verify what's actually being reported by people?
It's quite difficult. A lot of the information sources are kind of siloed, and you need like certain information about people who are arrested, but you don't know their names necessarily. So it's hard to kind of go back. Everything is kind of after the fact. ICE does, on a somewhat regular basis, release kind of aggregate detention data, which gives us a sense. For example, for July, ICE had detained nationally the most. I think it was about 60,000 people. And that's the most in President Trump's second term, including in New Mexico. Some of our detention facilities saw very steep increases. But the way that figure is calculated is kind of strange. It's like an average from the last fiscal year. So it gives you a sense of trends, but not really how many people are in the facility on any given day. And then there are entities like the Deportation Data Project and others that are trying to really parse through this via FOIA requests. But then ICE, only doesn't always respond to a FOIA with kind of like individual level data very easily. So anyway, it's difficult. We have been able to anecdotally. I got a video over the weekend, for example, from an acquaintance of an arrest, and the acquaintance asked the guy his name, and so like that's a data point. And that's kind of how it tends to work. And the organizations yesterday were saying, we're getting more calls, so that seems like there's an increase, but it's really hard to verify. And local authorities, last thing on this is, by design, do not have any sense of what ICE is doing. They have kind of like through statute or ordinance, like removed themselves from any ICE operation. So we can't look to them to give us details in most cases.
So tell me a bit more about this press conference yesterday in Albuquerque. What were they saying is going on here?
They were raising concerns. It was several groups, New Mexico Immigrant Law Center, El Centro de Igualdad y Derechos, local elected officials at the county and city level, just had been reporting that they think ICE is increasing its operations in the city. They were pointing to local ordinances, the Safe Community Spaces, which kind of asked businesses to establish private areas that would require an ICE warrant to access, and also seeks to prohibit ICE from using public city resources to effectuate ICE arrests. And they were also just kind of trying to rally and remind the immigrant community that they have resources if they end up being targeted or interact with ICE, and what their rights were. But underlying that was what seemed to people an increase in not only the number of arrests, but in arrests that they found troubling. They described some of them that the only way that it could have happened in their analysis was through racial profiling and not through a targeted, like knowing who the person was. So it was both a concern about the increase in arrests and also in the nature of them.
And we are taking calls this morning, and we'd love to know from our listeners if these recent immigration enforcement actions are changing the way that you or people go about your daily lives in New Mexico, or if you've had any encounters or heard of any encounters. You can call us at 505-277-5866. Patrick, I'd like to go back to talking a bit about Edgar Chacon Miranda and these criminal charges that he's had from several years ago, because ICE did specifically state that he was taken because of these charges. What were they, and what happened to cause them to get dropped originally?
Right. So ICE referred to him as a quote criminal illegal alien with an extensive criminal history, including arrest for battery against a household member, criminal sexual penetration, child abuse, and child abandonment. Those charges were brought in 2018 and dropped soon after. Later. The district attorney's office has basically said that there were a variety of reasons, one of which was that the victim wasn't cooperative, and that the statute of limitations ran out after a period of delay. That's basically what happened with those charges. Soon after this came out, DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, and ICE pointed to these charges. That started another conversation with Republicans kind of seizing on these charges to say that the Democrats are defending rapists and criminals and and really just criticized the Democrats for kind of running to criticize ICE when, given these charges that he was never convicted of.
Right, or taken to trial, right?
Right.
So what about Adriana Ruiz? Does she have charges against her or any sort of violent history?
Not that I could find. We are still trying to find out more about these other arrests in Santa Fe, and any, I will say that the person who was arrested in Albuquerque, just this is one anecdote, but I had his name, so I looked him up. He was a business owner, was driving a work truck, and did not have any criminal charges that I could find.
So it certainly doesn't seem like it's an across the board going after people with violent histories or something like that.
Right. And there is some data about that that ICE releases in terms of ICE detention. In Torrance County, I think we reported recently that 30% of the Torrance County detainees had some criminal charge. No evidence whether it was a conviction or not, but that means 70% did not of ICE detainees.
So there was a protest in Santa Fe following these arrests. Who was organizing that demonstration, and what was the message that the protesters were trying to communicate?
That was it seemed like a multi-coalition protest that I was only there briefly. I did talk to a few people, including a county commissioner who was talking about developing a county-wide system of monitoring for arrests and like a community response every time there is a confirmed arrest in their community. I do think there's a broader conversation in Santa Fe and Santa Fe County about how they can move forward some of these ordinances about similar to Albuquerque's or elsewhere. And there is a broader conversation, including at the press conference yesterday, about how some of these local responses could be expanded to the state level. There might be, at the upcoming legislative session, for example, a safe community space law across the state aiming to help protect people in rural areas in addition to the big cities. So,
and then what about the families? What happens next for them? Like, do they have legal options to find out, where their loved ones are being held and then help them?
I do believe that that the families have an attorney who is trying to represent them in these cases. And broadly, there are organizations that were speaking at that news conference and yesterday in Santa Fe, and then also yesterday, who were encouraging people to reach out to them if their loved one is picked up by ICE or whatever. But what begins now is a very opaque process for them. If they figure out where their family member is, then they're kind of like following them through the immigration process. Who knows how long they'll be detained? What will happen next? That's a whole other animal.
Well, thank you, Patrick. Appreciate you coming in and talking to us about this today. Now we're going to turn to something, closer to the KUNM studios, I suppose. On July 22nd, a simmering conflict about a new mosque in Albuquerque boiled over, leading to an arrest outside the St. Therese of the Infant Jesus Catholic Church. Paloma Chapa, the news editor for the Daily Lobo, is here to talk about that story. Thank you for joining me today, Paloma.
Thank you for having me.
So, Paloma, what exactly happened at the St. Therese Church?
With the attack regard?
Yeah.
So there was a guy who showed up with a gun, and the gun was visible enough that he was able to be charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault. And it was Chavez who was out there, as well as, I believe, somebody else who's affiliated with the church. And that it was there was some conflict with a water bottle, and this is based on the police report. And then it ended up escalating into that situation where this guy in this car took out his gun and then had to get arrested after that.
So what was the connection between this alleged attacker and the controversy surrounding the proposed Albuquerque Islamic Center Mosque in the North Valley?
So, based on what organizers are saying, is that they are saying this wasn't an isolated incident. It had been building up from social media. So, like, on July 1st, Chavez,
Father Chavez.
Father Chavez spoke at public comment at a commission meeting in support of the church. And then there was a 1-minute video that went all over social media and kind of spiraled into what he called, like, anyway, people started posting comments on it and stuff that were, like, blatantly racist and nationalist and stuff.
Right.
And then after that, it led to organizers were saying that it led to the July 22nd attack.
Right. So Father Chavez, to be clear, is speaking in favor of the establishment of this Islamic Center in the North Valley. It's been quite controversial. So what was it about his comments that provoked this person to come and speak to him outside of the Catholic Church? Do we know?
I'm not sure. It was a short. And people at public comment were given a short amount of time, and he spoke in favor of it. I think the fact that the Catholic Church is located in the North Valley, and which is where most of the opposition is coming from the North Valley, seemingly, but then there's also this speculation that there's outside people because of the social media component.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm not sure what his comments.
So the Islamic Center, it already existed in Albuquerque.
Yes.
Prior to any discussion of moving to the North Valley. Why are they interested in moving into the North Valley?
So there's an Islamic Center that has been on the piece of land that is in the North Valley already. They're just adding a mosque component.
Oh, so it already existed there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, Commissioner Barboa of District 3, Adrian Barboa, was saying that they've always been good neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And she said she was, like, proud of the integrity of this process of approving the mosque.
Mm-hmm.
So the mosque would be in addition to the Islamic Center.
Right. So how did it become so controversial? Like, what are people saying about the building of this mosque that they have a problem with?
So then a nearby neighborhood association appealed the approval of the zoning changes for the mosque to be built because they said it would, like, clash with the culture of the area. And that appeal was denied.
Okay.
And what people have said in response to that clash of culture kind of thing is that the previous family member of the landowners of that, where the Islamic Center is now, said that is just he was saying that the zoning appeal and all of that is kind of a mask for an underlying prejudice against, like, that.
Like anti-Islamic sentiment? Yeah, okay.
And so that's probably why the appeal wasn't approved and it was denied.
Are we seeing a lot of, like, really angry people at these public comment meetings?
Early on, yeah, there was people that showed up, like, raising their voices and like, making a bit of a scene.
And specifically, were they saying, were they talking about the zoning issues, or were they focused on their problem with Islam?
There was some comments there that were about their issues with Islam.
Okay. Well, we are going to pause the conversation here, but there is still time for you to call in and tell us what you think about any of the stories we've discussed today. Possible Sandia Mountain land transfer, the increased ICE arrests in Santa Fe, or the controversy over the Islamic Center opening in Albuquerque's North Valley. You can call us at 505-277-5866. This is Let's Talk New Mexico. I'm Ty Bannerman. I'm currently speaking to Paloma Chapa, the news editor for the Daily Lobo, about the controversy surrounding a possible, a mosque that is being planned for the North Valley. I did want to touch on something you said, which was that there's a social media component to this story as well. Not only are people coming to public comment sessions to speak about their opinions, some of them rather harmful. But what are people saying online? What is the online scape looking like when this story appears on Facebook or what have you?
Most of the the comments have been made on Facebook, which I don't have. But Chavez described it as like the video spiraling into, quote, public hate and racism, but also a combination of support for like the mosque and religious freedom as well.
And you described that there was a press conference involving leaders from several different faiths who came together to speak about this. Who was represented there? What did they have to say?
At the press conference, there was people who spoke was Chavez, of course, at the church, and then there was the Islamic Center director of that center. He was also there, and we got the chance to talk to him afterwards, and he said that he wasn't surprised by the attacks, but also not afraid of future threats. And then there was somebody from Nahalat Shalom, Jewish Center, which is also in the North Valley. And yeah, those were some of the organizations that were there.
And in the story, you quote Catholic, Muslim, and other religious leaders talking about freedom of religion and the right to worship here. What are they hoping happens next, both with the mosque itself and with the kind of the tone of the conversation around it?
I think now that the mosque has been approved, from the vibe that I got from there is that people were hoping that the hate doesn't continue after the construction of the mosque and people just can practice their religion without being fearful of attacks.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Paloma. We have a call from John in Albuquerque. I believe he has a question or a comment about the first story we were talking about today, the potential transfer of Sandia mountain land to the Sandia Pueblo. Good morning, John. What would you like to add to the conversation today?
Hey, good morning. My question is factual. What data, if any, do your reporters have about the track record of BIA in terms of protection of land, if it were transferred, in terms of, all the relevant issues, trail maintenance, resources to be able to enforce anti-littering laws, selling off mineral rights, all those sort of pertinent questions. I really don't know much about if there's been an instance like this before, if it were to be transferred, and if so, what the track record is.
All right. Well, thank you, John. Lily, do you have some thoughts for John?
I personally don't have an answer to that question about the track record specifically of the BIA in maintaining land. But I will say that I've heard from outdoor people that they're concerned. They've pointed to the management of tent rocks up in northern New Mexico, which some of them have said has had its access restricted recently.
Right. I believe you have to get a permit and take a tour now at this point. So that could be relevant for the future.
Yes, some people are concerned that something similar might happen in the Sandia Mountains.
Okay. And then we have a call from Glenn in Jemez Springs. Good morning, Glenn.
Good morning. Thanks for airing all of this today. It's very needed. Several of us protest on the highway. Friend from Jemez Pueblo, myself and others, against what ICE is doing against our Iran war. And within an hour, and we've been doing this for weeks, within an hour of being on the highway and protesting, at least 100 people, I count the number of folks responding with horns, waving peace signs. I think this shows that in this small little part of New Mexico, people in New Mexico are upset with what's going on. And I encourage others to step up and protest wherever they are in this state. Secondly, I have a very dear friend I've known since 9/11, 2001. He's an imam at a mosque in Albuquerque that shares with the Unitarian Church, Abdur Rauf, and he comes up here to our Presbyterian Church every December and shares with us as a potluck. And I just can't believe people in the North Valley of Albuquerque, where I lived for 20 years raising kids, that folks are so terribly ignorant about Islam. It's a peaceful religion. I was a Lutheran chaplain in Vietnam era and hospital chaplain in Albuquerque. It just grieves me deeply that folks are reacting the way they are, that we have ICE, a total Nazi program. I'm German American, and I can see, as others can see, this is just pure fascism now in our country. Okay, I encourage everybody voting in November to vote out every Republican there is.
All right. Yeah, we do have to cut you off there just because we can't tell people how to vote on KUNM. But thank you for calling in and giving us your thoughts, Glenn. So the next story that we have is one that has some pretty deep roots in the state. Back in October of 2020, the Soldiers Monument in Santa Fe Plaza, often referred to as the obelisk, was toppled by a group of protesters. And for a few years, the wreckage was kept out of view, but the pieces are now being displayed in the New Mexico History Museum. Jerome Morrison of 505 Omatic recently reported on this state of affairs and where things might go from here. Thank you for coming on down from Santa Fe, Jerome.
Thanks for having me.
So can you give us a review of the story so far? What is the Soldiers Monument? Why is it such a controversial object in Santa Fe?
So the Soldiers Monument is a monument that was built in, I think, 1867, really as a means of trying to raise money to bury soldiers who had died during the Civil War in the battles of Peralta, Galisteo Pass, some very pivotal battles that were really important for during the Civil War and preventing the Confederates from expanding all the way to the west to California. Well, first up to Colorado to seize gold, and then out to California so that they can have an unblockaded port, because the Confederacy at that time was suffering financially because of a big... there's so much history that's there. I recommend you go check out some of the videos that I've been doing covering that history. So this monument was built, but one of the most controversial aspects of it was they needed to raise more money for it after it was established. And one of the ways of doing that was to also not only honor the soldiers who had died in the Civil War, but also soldiers who had died in the Indian Wars during the times before the Civil War and after the Civil War. And that plaque had a very controversial word on it, which was, dedicated to the soldiers who fought against the, quote, S-word Indians. Right. And this monument has been up since 1867. I believe sometime in the 70s, that controversial word was chiseled off. There has been decades of conversation in the city of removing the monument, people who wanted to keep it there, people who wanted to be removed. The city agreed that they would do something with it. And then during a lot of the back and forth, particularly in 2020 during the Black Lives Matter movement, where there were a lot of historic monuments that were coming down, in October of 2020, this monument, which is the only monument dedicated to Union soldiers that came down, and that's also a complicated history, was protested during Indigenous Peoples Day, or really that entire weekend. And
back
then
in 2020, I believe.
Back in 2020, and then the right sort of circumstances started happening on that Monday on Indigenous Peoples Day, where the obelisk was chained and then pulled down, and has now been continued to be a subject of what to do with the rest of it, because it's not entirely pulled down. It was just the obelisk, but the plinth is still there. The damaged plaque that used to have the word on it is still there. There's so much detail in history and complication that's wrapped up in it. So City Council is just trying to figure out what steps happen next, and it's really based on a lawsuit that was done by Union Protectiva. It was an organization that was founded, sued the city of Santa Fe, and basically the outcome of that is Santa Fe needs to abide by the State Historic Preservation Office, known as SHPO. So SHPO is going to eventually have kind of a final say on this. But
what they do with the pieces.
But what they do with it. But City Council has 5 options that they're currently weighing.
Okay, we have a call from Jay in Placitas who has some thoughts about historical context. Good morning, Jay. What would you like to say today? Jay, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay.
I'm right. Can you hear me?
I can now,
I'm right
yes.
here.
Go ahead.
Here we go. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
You're talking about some issues, both actually all three of the issues so far, the Sandias, the mosque, and then certainly the obelisk, is that when we fail to remember history accurately, we continue to do the same stupid stuff again and again. The premise that is missing as it applies to both Sandia and the mosque, the development or creation of the mosque, is that, number one, the lands that were acknowledged by the Spanish colonizers was acknowledged by the crown, a sovereign entity. Mm-hmm. That land is still owned, and certainly it's a collective society, still part of the pueblo Sandia. Mm-hmm. And certainly I appreciate the words of the two people whose voices were recorded, especially the young lady. Mm-hmm. Certainly it would be nice to have it available for everyone. Unfortunately, that has not been the case since the creation of the United States. Mm-hmm. And so the Sandia Pueblo, the people of the Sandia Pueblo, have every right to say, this is our land. It has always been since ours, even before the creation of the United States. And then certainly many of our Jewish, Muslim fellow citizens have been here even before the creation of the United States. Mm-hmm. So unless we really want to talk with respect and certainly with accuracy as it applies to the history of the United States, or actually even the history of New Mexico, we really need to do our homework. And unfortunately, many of our fellow citizens aren't doing that because they really don't know and don't begin at the start at the beginning of what constitutes the history of New Mexico.
Okay, thank you so much for calling in, Jay. And Jerome, what are your thoughts as to what Jay is saying? Is something especially as controversial as this soldier's monument? Mm-hmm. How do we use the historical context to talk about it in a way that we can come to a kind of common understanding?
Yeah, so my approach to telling the story was to really look at all four sides of the plinths and the stories that were being told there. So two of them are dedicated to Civil War battles, one that was lost in New Mexico and then one that was won, one that talked about the Indian Wars, and then one that was also talking about the last one that I did was about the the territorial legislature who existed at the time. And so it's such a complex tapestry and layers of colonization that have happened here in New Mexico that's still very present on the surface. As you look at the names of the streets, as you look at the names of towns, all these different things, which is kind of different back from the East Coast to parts of the South where I came from, where those histories are renamed and kind of paved over. Everything here is still on the surface. And I think that's one of the beautiful things and one of the great qualities about New Mexico is how much of a microcosm of the entire United States story that can be told and looked at through this monument and through its history. And so I do think it's important to not simplify these stories. There's a lot of people who want to hold on to the myths, and I kind of think about old Western movies where you have white hats and black hats. But more so things are more of that kind of complicated spaghetti Western aspect where there's no real good guys or bad guys. There's people who are trying to do what they need to do to survive in the desert. And so how can we reconcile all of these different complicated histories? How do you deal with the cognitive dissonance and deal with these two opposing forces, these two truths that are at odds with one another? But there are ways of reconciling that and telling the story and coming together and fellowshipping. And that's what I'm hoping to see in the years after, no matter what they decide with this monument or what they decide with some of these other lands. How do we bring people together and talk about the stories and fellowship and get into the complexity of it all? Because it's more interesting that way than just the white hats and black hats.
So I'm very curious, since your 505 Omatic uses the medium of short videos, typically around 3 minutes or so, how do you get that kind of complexity across working in such a small box in a way?
because it's visual, we're able to put a lot of like just text and other pictures. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So for every image that we get on there, it's another 1,000 words that's on there. I also get to speak pretty quickly. I'm a fast talker, so I can pack a lot of information into those 3 minutes. But with this story, it wasn't just one. I've been doing a series of them. Every video that I did, as I said, talked about one side of the plinth, and I still have some more in the can that I need to do, like talking about like the Masonic history and those things. But yeah, and there is only so much that we can get in those 3 minutes. So I just did a lot of focus on the history, on the different facets of it, talking to different state historians, both Esteban Real Galvez and Robert Martinez, our former New Mexico state historians. And there's, so much information that has not gone out on those videos yet. But I've done the best that I can and just packing a lot in 3 minutes.
Right. So going back to the video, you note that this is the first time that these surviving pieces of the obelisk have been publicly displayed since they were toppled. Where have they been since then?
So it's actually found out yesterday that it's not even all of the pieces. There are two larger pieces that were as difficult to be moved. So only like the top 3 sections of the obelisk are what's on display, and the others have just been in secure storage in Santa Fe City facility for the last 20 years. I know. I think some of the members of Union Protectiva were able to go and see the remaining pieces of the obelisk. But yeah, now they are in the museum where the public can take a look and see kind of. To quote the mayor, this is not a Lego set. And so to understand the difficulty of putting the pieces back together as they are or with purely historic materials is one of the options. And yeah, but it's just been in city storage since then.
And what is going to happen with them next as Santa Fe kind of tries to figure out what to do with them?
So back in March, there were 5 options that were presented to City Council. One of so just going in order, is to rebuild it using historic materials. So they did find the site where the stone was, the quarry where the stones came from. So cut a new obelisk to put up. Another one I like to call the obelisk of Theseus, like Ship of Theseus reference, where rebuilding with both historic and new materials. Then there's rebuilding the obelisk with completely new materials, and then maybe displaying the stones in the in that fenced-in area. Moving it to another location. There was some proposal to move it to the Veterans Cemetery, but I believe the Veterans Cemetery says that they're not interested in having it. And one comment I remember during public comment was that the cemetery is supposed to be a place of respite, and so moving such a controversial item there would kind of be in conflict with the meaning of the area. And then the former city manager, before he left, put one more out, which was to seal it.
Okay. Well, we have reached the end of the hour. Thank you to everyone who called in or left a message on our website. A big thank you to our guests. That's Lily Alexander, Paloma Chapa, Jerome Morrison, and Patrick Lohman. You can check out this show's webpage to get their links and to the stories that they wrote about these issues. You can comment on the show by email at letstalk@kunm.org or find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Look for KUNM 89.9. Audio from the show will be up on the website soon. You can also watch the episode on our YouTube channel later today. Find the Let's Talk New Mexico podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Next week, we are talking about the increase in human-bear encounters in the state. Our engineer is Marino Spencer. Florian Knowles handled the phones, and Bryce Dix produced the show this week. I'm Ty Bannerman. Thank you for listening.